The Jets pull off a comeback for the ages. They rally from 13 down in the final 2 minutes to defeat the Cleveland Browns. How did they do it? We'll discuss today on the Locked On Jets podcast.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day on this glorious Monday for New York Jets fans. It's Monday, September 19th, 2022, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com, thanking you for making the show your first listen or your first watch every day. This podcast is free, and it's available on all platforms, including YouTube. It's a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day, Monday through Friday, through the week. If you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button wherever you're watching or listening. You'll receive notifications as new episodes are posted. You'll never miss an episode. If you're listening on a podcast source, please give the show a 5-star review. It helps the channel out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. So does giving this video a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. What a day it is for the New York Jets. Yesterday, they somehow, some way, found a way to defeat the Cleveland Browns 31-30. They pulled victory from the jaws of defeat. With 2 minutes left in the game, it felt like it was over. The Jets were down 13. It seemed hopeless. Somehow, some way, they found a victory. I still can't believe it. It's just, how many times through the years have we watched the Jets lose a game like that? How many times have we watched the Jets seem like they have a game in hand? I've been watching the Jets for 30 years now, and I can't count how many times I've watched the Jets blow a game like it's so good to be on the other side of it. And of course, today we're going to recap an absolutely amazing Jets victory. I mean, the best Jets victory I can remember in some time. A really interesting game, kind of a wild game, as you might imagine, with the Jets rallying from that late deficit. And it was a game, despite the fact both teams scored 30 points, it was a game that really did not have a ton of big plays in it. You know, I said in the game preview on Friday that I was not expecting either team to make a ton of big plays, and that mainly was because of the quarterback situation. And, you know, sometimes I get the game wrong when I do the preview. Sometimes, you know, you can't predict what's going to happen, and there certainly were a number of things I never would have predicted that happened in this game. But despite the big scoring numbers on both sides, there really were not a ton of big plays. In fact, prior to the final 2 minutes, I think both teams had one play that went for more than 25 yards. A big play in this game was like a 20-yard play. It was just both teams were able to sustain long drives. Both teams were able to consistently move the chains, and it was a back-and-forth game where the Jets were always behind. Every time the Jets tied the game up, the Browns scored, so it was always kind of fluctuating between the Browns having a lead and the Jets tying the game. And, you know, it began early. The Jets had to punt on their first drive. There was a play near the sideline on third down where it was kind of a controversial review. It looked like Jets may have had a first down to move the chains on the completion, but it was called out of bounds. Joe Flacco actually missed a guy Jeremy Ruckert was wide open underneath for a big gain, but the Jets had to punt. From that point, the rest of the first half, there were lots of long drives, really not many possessions on either side because both teams were sustaining drives. The Browns put together a 14-play, 90-yard touchdown drive to take a 7-0 lead. The Jets answer with a 13-play drive of their own, capped by a Joe Flacco touchdown pass to Garrett Wilson. Cleveland gets the ball back. They put together a 10-play touchdown drive. The Jets actually put together a pretty good drive, and then Joe Flacco takes a strip sack, which was, I guess, really Max Mitchell as much as it was Flacco getting beat on the plays. But the Jets put together an 8-play drive that got them into scoring range. Then the defense got their first stop of the day, which was a rare occurrence. They got a quick 3-and-out. And right before the end of the first half, the Jets put together another 8-play drive. This one resulted in a touchdown pass from Flacco to Breece Hall. So it was tied 14-14 heading into the locker room. The Browns then come out and put together an 11-play. So nothing but long drives. The Browns put together an 11-play field goal drive to go up 17-14. Jets offense kind of stalls at that point, but late in the third quarter, early fourth, they put together a 9-play field goal drive. So I'm telling you, like, all of these drives were like really long drives. There were no like 60, 70-yard plays, at least until the last 2 minutes. Greg Zuerlein nailed a 57-yard field goal to take to tie the game early in the fourth quarter. However, the Jets promptly allowed the Browns to go right down the field. A 9-play touchdown drive. They took the lead. Then the teams traded punts, and the Browns got the ball back with a little over 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter. The Jets decided to punt the ball deep in their own territory, down 7 with a little over 2 minutes left. And this is where things started to get wild. Now, the Jets can't get off the field, and this was one of the stories of the day. In fact, in a world where the Jets don't pull off this miracle comeback, the defensive performance is storyline number one for the New York Jets, because this was a dreadful defensive performance. They allowed the Browns to do essentially what they wanted, and they could never get a key stop. I kept telling you all the time. I mean, how many times did I tell you the Jets tied the game and the Browns promptly put together a long scoring drive right after to reclaim the lead? Well, the Browns got the ball back with a little over 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and they're up 7 at this point. And the Jets can't get off the field on the third down. There was a 3rd and 7 play where Jacoby Brissett checks it down to Kareem Hunt. The Jets just kind of lost Hunt on the play because he originally stayed in looking like he was going to block, and whoever was supposed to pick him up just failed to do it because I think they read that Hunt was a blocker. So Brissett checks it down to Hunt. He picks up 11 yards on the 3rd and 7, and it really kind of has the feel that the game's over at that point. The Jets had to use their second timeout. So the Jets have 1 timeout. They have the 2-minute warning, and the Browns are in field goal range. On the first down play, Kareem Hunt runs for 4 yards. And that's what and so the Jets now are in real trouble here. On 2nd and 6, Hunt breaks a run down the left sideline for 12 yards, but he steps out of bounds. Not only does he step out of bounds, he steps out of bounds with just over 2 minutes left on the clock. So the clock would have run down to the 2-minute warning there. The Browns had to run another play before the 2-minute warning, and on that play, Nick Chubb breaks a 12-yard touchdown run, but if he had just gone down there, the Browns would have been in position to just run out the clock. The Jets may have been able to stop, the Jets may have gotten the ball back with a little bit of time, but the Browns would have been able to run down the clock. They would have kicked a chip shot field goal. The Jets would have gotten the ball back with maybe a half-minute left down 10. Because Hunt scored the touchdown instead of going down, the Jets got the ball back down 13, and they were down 13 because the Browns missed the extra point. But the Jets at least had like a little bit of life. And now, listen, I'm lying to you if I think the Jets have any shot to win the game at this point, but they at least have a better shot than they would have, down 10 with 30 seconds left. And then on the second play of the Jets' ensuing drive, the Browns completely bust the coverage, and Flacco hits Corey Davis for a 66-yard touchdown. The Jets are suddenly down 6 because Greg Zuerlein makes the extra point. So Jets are, a little bit of life, but they still have to recover an onside kick. And nobody ever recovers an onside kick in the NFL these days. The Jets figured out how to do it, though. And I got to give Brant Boyer a lot of credit because in today's NFL, it's really tough to recover an onside kick because everybody tries the play where you have the high bounce, and receiving teams know how to field those. Essentially, they just stick enough blockers. They just have everybody's got a blocking assignment, and you have a designated catcher. And it's very difficult to pull that off. So the Jets pull a little fake out. They fake like they're going to kick right. They actually kick left. It's kind of a ball that's rolling. There's no high bounce. Will Parks has a shot at getting it and misses it, but was able to tip it to Justin Hardy, and the Jets get the ball back. And I have to say, late game situations, down to score, or even up a score when the other team's got the ball, I'm always nervous. I never really know what to expect. I don't feel really confident either way. This was an exception. At that point, I really felt like the Jets were going to win the game, because you could just feel the Browns were shell-shocked. The Browns had completely failed. I mean, the Browns were making mistake after mistake. You could just feel that the Jets' confidence level was surging. The Browns had no idea what hit them, and the Jets put together a drive. And I got to say, for all the criticism Joe Flacco has received from me and from others, I was feeling confident in Flacco on that drive. It was almost like Flacco could see the finish line. He could summon up that Baltimore version of Flacco, which we really have not seen his entire Jets tenure. And he rallies the Jets on a 9-play touchdown drive. The Jets actually had a couple drops on this drive that were fortuitous because they had a couple guys drop passes where they would have been tackled in bounds and the Jets would have lost some time. So even like the Jets drops on these plays, where even when the Jets are messing up on the sequence, it ends up working out for them. But it's capped on a 3rd down play. Joe Flacco hits Garrett Wilson over the middle, a 12-yard touchdown. The Jets win the game, and that's the game winner. Zuerlein adds the extra point. Again, that missed extra point. Cleveland missed the extra point at 30-17. Who would have ever thought that would end up playing a big role in the game? But Zierlein makes the extra point. The Browns did get the ball back with 22 seconds left. They could not do much with it, though. And Ashton Davis had an interception on a desperation heave by Jacoby Brissett to clinch it. The Jets have their first victory of the season. It's their first victory of 2022. It's their first September victory since 2018. And the Jets are 1-1, and everything just feels so much better today. It felt like we were heading for another bad loss. It felt like we were heading for 0-2. It felt like we had a lot of questions about the defense, questions about the quarterback, Flacco. You know, if Chubb goes down, the narrative around Flacco from that game is very different. Sometimes you just need a break. And there were lots of heroes for the Jets in this game. As we continue here on this Monday game recap on Locked On Jets, I'll tell you who some of them were. There are lots of standout performances. We're going to give credit where credit is due. That's ahead here on this Game Recap Monday episode. Well, the amazing thing about football is you never know who's going to surprise you with a standout performance. And that's especially true if you're a daily fantasy player. Can you imagine picking Joe Flacco yesterday? Well, if you did on PrizePicks, you probably earned some money. Here's how PrizePicks work. You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. So if you had Joe Flacco yesterday, I'm sure his projection was not 4 touchdowns. You don't have to compete against other people on PrizePicks. It's just you versus the projections available. And they offer projections on any sport you watch, so it goes beyond the NFL. It's NBA, it's baseball, NHL, PGA, college football, college basketball with men's and women's, Euro basketball, MMA, boxing, tennis, NASCAR, WNBA, esports, and my favorite, daily fantasy for disc golf. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's really that easy, and there are safe and fast withdrawals, and PrizePicks is currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Here's how it works. You download the PrizePicks app or go to PrizePicks.com, and you sign up and you play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. It's one word with no space, LOCKEDON. That means if you deposit $50, PrizePicks gives you $50. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks gives you $100. And don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign-up for an instant deposit match of up to $100 at PrizePicks. Thank you for making Locked On Jets your first listen every day. This show's a daily podcast, new episodes Monday through Friday, and we're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Today we are recapping a truly unbelievable New York Jets win. I still am in shock that they were able to pull this game off. If you're a Jets fan, you've been through losses like that. You've been on the other side of these games. It's just so good to be on the winning side of this. Let's talk about some of the stars of the game. And without question, and with apologies to Joe Flacco, who we'll get to, the number one star of this game for the Jets is Garrett Wilson. 8 catches, 102 yards, 2 touchdowns, including the game winner late in the fourth quarter. I said it yesterday when I did a post-game podcast. I wrote it in an article for GangGreenNation.com. A star is born. And maybe it's too early to say that after one game, but this is the type of game that just feels like a launching pad for Garrett Wilson. It's just so effortless for him. He just gets open so easily. The way he creates separation between his skills, between his speed and his quick twitch ability, his quickness, his route running savvy. He just gets open so easily, and he's explosive with the ball in his hands. If you've been watching Joe Flacco, you know Flacco's not really going to try and let it rip into tight windows. He's a guy who, at this point of his career, plays very conservatively. He's only going to throw to a receiver who's wide open, and Garrett Wilson was wide open a lot. I mentioned the Jets only had one big play prior to the Corey Davis touchdown in the fourth quarter where the Browns had a defensive breakdown. Garrett Wilson produced that one play. He produced a 31-yard completion. We've been waiting since really Brandon Marshall left for somebody to be the guy on offense for the Jets. That guy that they can just count on. The guy they go to when the chips are down. The guy, even when the other team's defense knows he's getting the ball, they can't stop it. Maybe it's a little premature to say Garrett Wilson is the guy, but he certainly looked like he took major steps toward being the guy yesterday. I thought maybe it would be Breece Hall. Maybe it would be Elijah Moore. Maybe it's Garrett Wilson. I think Garrett Wilson really showed, and I never like to put expectations on a rookie receiver, but man, that was impressive. Part of the reason I love the Garrett Wilson pick was that I felt the odds of him being bad were very low. And I felt the odds of him being a really good player were pretty high. And maybe we're going to find the ceiling. Maybe this is just one game, but maybe that was the start of something special. You see it every year. There's one receiver who just starts off. He has a big game, and you say, "Wow, that guy's good." And it's a launching pad for something big. And maybe Garrett Wilson is the guy the Jets offense runs through. And the Jets, last week and even in preseason, you got the feeling they were kind of using him as a rotational guy who rotates in and out. I don't have a problem with making a rookie earn his spot. Garrett Wilson's earned his spot now. Garrett Wilson needs to be a full-time player. Braxton Berrios can go to the bench. They can put him in when there's an injury, when somebody's tired or an injury. But Garrett Wilson's a full-time player now, as far as I'm concerned. Other heroes, look, Joe Flacco. I've been saying, maybe there's some really great game left in Flacco. Maybe he can channel the Baltimore Flacco. I think he channeled the Baltimore Flacco on that last drive. As I mentioned, I did not have a lot of confidence in Flacco until that last drive. And that touchdown pass to Wilson to win the game, and that was Baltimore Flacco. He was the second that back foot hit. Wilson was not even in his break yet, and there was no separation. But he saw where the route was developing, and he let it rip. And, you could feel the confidence level in Flacco on that last drive. Now, the game, if you look at the numbers, it looks like a spectacular game for Flacco. 26 for 44, 307 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, 1 fumble. He did fumble one ball away. Was a game that good? If you're watching that game, the performance level was not at the level of the box score. But he did, that last drive was sensational. He led the Jets back. The rest of the game, listen, he was better. I said going in, I felt like he needed to play credible football, and I think he did. I think he was a much better quarterback than he was a week ago. That game against Baltimore, he was awful. He took the Jets out of the game. And you listen to these announcers, and they never want to, they only want to praise guys who are veterans. We saw this with Frank Gore a couple of years ago. When you have a veteran who's been in the league a long time and who's a nice guy to the announcers, you get the feeling that they never want to criticize the guy, and they only want to praise him. Flacco, last week they're going on about, last week he was questioned so much by the fan. Well, he deserved to be. He was awful in that game. But this week he was better. And against a team like Cleveland, if Flacco played credible football, if he hit the open receivers, the Jets would have a shot. So I don't think this was like a 4-touchdown great performance. I don't think this is the type of game where now you say, well, Flacco stays in the lineup even when Zach Wilson's healthy. But Flacco gave the Jets what they needed yesterday. And Flacco played credit, and it was a big improvement. At this point of his career, I think that's the best you can hope for. Flacco hitting the open receivers, and then maybe finding that extra gear when the game's on the line. Good performance by Flacco. Breece Hall. This was a encouraging performance, I think, by Breece Hall. A guy who's, I think, still figuring it out to a certain extent. I think Breece Hall's going to be the type of guy who improves as the season goes along. But he showed that extra gear. And I get the feeling, like, since that Atlanta preseason game, there was lots of hype around him heading into that. Like, ever since the Jets drafted him through the Atlanta preseason game, people were really pumped about Breece Hall. And then he had a rough game against Atlanta, playing behind a backup offensive line where he really did not have much of a shot against the Falcons starting defense. It's like everybody left the bandwagon. Well, maybe yesterday was a little bit of a reminder of what he can bring to the table, because he got that great burst, 50 yards on only 7 carries, a 7.1 average, and he added that 10-yard touchdown reception from Flacco. So solid performance by Breece Hall. Corey Davis did, look, it was like a total busted coverage. It wasn't really Corey Davis doing anything special, but did haul in that 66-yard touchdown. You looked at the special teams. The special teams was a standout unit for the Jets. They were horrible in the first game. Braden Mann had a 20-yard punt in the first game. The special teams was outstanding for the Jets in this game. And when you're playing your backup quarterback on the road, sometimes you have to steal a possession. Special teams stole the Jets 2 possessions in this game, because on their first touchdown drive, they faked a punt, and Braden Mann threw an accurate pass to Jeff Smith to extend the drive on a 4th down on a fake punt. Then he executed that brilliant onside kick. I can't say enough about, I praise Brant Boyer, who deserves a lot of credit for it. Braden Mann kicked the ball perfectly, and the Jets, Justin Hardy jumped on it. Jets special teams stole the Jets 2 possessions. And not only that, Greg Zuerlein nailed a 57-yard field goal. That field goal he made to tie the game early in the 4th quarter was from 57 out. Another guy who received a lot of criticism last week. And again, like, I'm not going to be like one of these people who says, oh, he was criticized. I criticized him. And you know what? I don't regret criticizing him, because that's how it goes. He was bad last week. You criticize when they're bad, but you also praise when they're good. And Greg Zuerlein was good this week, and he made the extra point. And I don't want to give too much credit to a kicker for making an extra point. Even in a game on the line situation the last minute of the fourth quarter, an extra point should be automatic, but Cleveland did miss the extra point, so give Greg Zuerlein some praise. There's not a lot I can say to praise the Jets' defense. I mean, there was an awful defensive performance by the Jets. I think if we're going to be fair, Jacoby Brissett threw 5 incompletions all game, averaged 8.5 yards per attempt, threw for 22 for 27, 229 yards. Early in the game, the Jets' run defense was decent, but by the end, they were getting gashed. I mean, they ended up giving up 184 yards on the ground, 5 yards per carry. So I'll give a shout-out to 2 players on defense. One is Brandon Echols. Sauce Gardner briefly left the game with an injury. The Jets had a lot of injury scares in this game. I mean, Garrett Wilson left the game. Quinnen Williams left the game. It seemed like everybody was okay, but lots of the young players who were supposed to be impact players for the Jets left this game with an injury. Sauce Gardner briefly left. He fortunately was able to return. Brandon Echols came in a goal line situation, made a couple good plays when he was targeted. Browns went right after him. And the other guy I'll give credit to is Ashton Davis, who picked off that pass. It was a desperation pass. It wasn't a spectacular play, but Davis still made it. I mean, is it a career-changing play for Ashton Davis? I don't think this is a career trajectory changer the way Garrett Wilson's performance was yesterday, but Ashton Davis made the play to close the game out. But outside of that, I mean, that was the one negative for the Jets in this game, clearly. The defense did an awful job. They got 4 stops in the entire game. Browns scored 30 on them. Jacoby Brissett with their backup quarterback was playing great, but we can focus on the negative another day because it was a great Jets victory. What does this victory mean, however? Well, it's difficult to say, but ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast on this Monday recap, I'll offer some thoughts on how the Jets can build going forward after this amazing win over the Cleveland Browns. Well, if you were at that game yesterday, you got quite a treat, and there are still 8 road games left in the season for the Jets. So if you want to travel and see the Jets on the road, there are lots of travel arrangements you have to make, but if you need a car, you should know that Turo is the world's largest car-sharing marketplace, and with Turo, you can book any car you want, wherever you want it, from a community of local hosts. You can browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the US, Canada, and the UK. You can book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family road trip. You can get a classic or luxury car for a special event, birthday, or holiday. You can find affordable economy cars if you're on a budget and just need to get from point A to point B. You can test drive that new electric vehicle you have had your eye on to see how it fits in your everyday life. Many Turo hosts can deliver the car right to you. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms and conditions and exclusions apply. Ditch boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo, Turo.com. Locked On Jets podcast after a remarkable victory for the New York Jets. They beat the Cleveland Browns 31-30 yesterday in Cleveland, rallying from 13 down in the final 2 minutes. Really rallying from 13 down in the final 82 seconds. But they got the ball back with just under 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and then they scored a touchdown. It's really tough to believe the Jets won that game. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of Jets fans who probably missed the comeback because they turned it off, or decided to go out and do yard work. They figured the game was over. I thought the game was over. I have to watch it till the end. And those of us who watched it were in for a treat. You watch games after game, year after year, and you see wins, you see losses, but most of them never make a memory. Yesterday is the type of game that reminds you why you're a fan, why you watch, because every so often, and it was I think it was over 2,000 games in the NFL where a team had a 13-point lead at that point of the game and lost. It's sometimes, occasionally you see something special, something so inspiring, something that fires you up so much that it rekindles why you love sports. And that was that kind of game yesterday. Now, where did the Jets go from here? Well, obviously they have a game against Cincinnati this week. It's a rematch of a big upset the Jets had last year on Halloween, where they shocked the Bengals with also a backup quarterback, Mike White, who, if Flacco doesn't throw for 4 touchdowns yesterday, if Nick Chubb goes down, there's probably a very real discussion here. If Nick Chubb goes down with under 2 minutes left and the Browns run out the clock and the Jets fall to 0-2, and Flacco ends that game where he was at, which was about 5.5 yards per attempt, there's a very real discussion this week about whether the Jets turn back to Mike White, who threw for 405 last year against the Bengals when the Jets played them on Halloween. But that's all finished now. I think we know Flacco is going to be the starting quarterback for week 3 at least. Where did the Jets go from here? Well, a lot of it depends on what happens with the Bengals, because sometimes you see these games and it's fun and it's kind of just ends up being a footnote to the season. A fun victory, something you remember forever, but something that doesn't really have an impact. But sometimes a game like this can really launch you. you have to remember in the NFL, there are only 17 games each year, which is a small sample size, which means sometimes a lucky break can really get a team going on a run. It can build the confidence. It can create a win streak. And we see this every year in the NFL. Teams that maybe you aren't expecting to be good, they just kind of catch fire. And maybe that's what happens for the Jets. And sometimes it's more than the season. Sometimes you look back at one pivotal game, an unexpected victory. It's the type of thing that turns everything around. It turns the trajectory of the franchise around. It turns around the general manager's tenure, a head coach's tenure. And it's possible that this was a big step forward for the Jets. Now, we don't know. It's also possible, 7 days from now, we'll be talking about the Jets getting blown out by the Bengals, and we'll have completely forgotten about it. In fact, there's a possibility we look back on this as a negative, because if the Jets lose to the Bengals next week, I'm sure plenty of people will say, and not completely unjustly, that Jets should be 0-3 right now. If it wasn't for some miracle in Cleveland, the Jets wouldn't even have a win. But it also could be the type of thing that could be a springboard for the Jets. Now, as far as big takeaways go, I mean, the one thing I'm pretty confident in is Garrett Wilson looks great. And Breece Hall starting to show you some signs. And they were able to execute with Joe Flacco at quarterback. And Joe Flacco, listen, credit to Joe Flacco yesterday. I think we all know, despite the numbers yesterday, despite Joe Flacco playing well yesterday, let's be honest, Joe Flacco was pretty good in this game. Despite Joe Flacco being pretty good yesterday, he's still a limited quarterback. If this offense can work with a limited guy like Joe Flacco in there, then what's Zach Wilson going to do? And Zach Wilson, there's no guarantee Zach Wilson's going to be as good as advertised. But here's what I'll say. Zach Wilson now has a fair chance. Zach Wilson has every chance to prove himself in a way maybe Sam Darnold or Geno Smith did not. In a way Mark Sanchez did not in his last year. Zach Wilson has been given a chance. The Jets have actually built this thing correctly around Zach Wilson, where they've given their quarterback a chance to succeed. And yesterday's performance by these skilled players was proof of that. There's young talent on this team, and young guys are stepping up. And again, maybe this is the type of thing, maybe winning like that gives you the type of confidence that gets you on a little bit of a run. And then suddenly you're at midseason, you've weathered what looked like a difficult schedule on paper, and things are about to open up, and you've got a real chance to make some noise in the league this year. Maybe you're a year ahead of schedule. Of course, that's the hope. We don't know whether it'll turn out that way, but after a game like that, how can you not dream? How can you not be excited? Listen, there's going to be plenty of time this year to be frustrated when the Jets don't play well. There's going to be plenty of moments that will not be so great. You have to savor victories like this, because when you've been on the run like the Jets have been the last decade plus, you haven't had many moments like this. You haven't had many moments of just pure joy. And that was about as fun as I can remember in recent memory of a Jets game. Anyway, that's all for our episode today. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. Once again, it's a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. If you're new to the show, we have new episodes each day, Monday through Friday. If you enjoy it, please hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening. You'll receive notifications as new episodes are posted. You'll never miss an episode. If you're listening on a podcast source and like it, please give the show a 5-star review. It helps the channel out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. So does giving this episode a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. Have a great Monday, everybody. Enjoy Victory Monday. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.